What, sir? Let that sink in. Fun fact. It took humanity approximately 4 times longer to switch from copper swords to steel swords than it took to switch from steel swords to nuclear bombs. And it took humans approximately 50 times as long to switch from stone tools to bronze than it did to switch from bronze to firearms. Gwen Stefani is older than Ted Cruz. Gwen Stefani is 48, Ted Cruz is 46. You're welcome. When NASA pitched the idea of the Voyager missions to Richard Nixon with the idea of touring the outer planets, he was told that the last time it was possible, Thomas Jefferson was in the White House. The particular planetary alignment that Voyager 2 used on its journey occurs only once every 176 years. If the sun were scaled down to the size of a white blood cell, the Milky Way galaxy would be the size of the continental United States. The vastness of space is mind-boggling. Next to the US Army, Disney World is the largest buyer and importer of explosives in the USA. I was wondering what Mickey needed nukes for before I remembered fireworks exist. The Titanic had 2 sister ships, the Britannic and the Olympic. There was a woman called Violet Jessop, a nurse and a cruise liner stewardess, that worked on all 3. The Olympic crashed into a warship whilst leaving harbor, but was able to make it back. She was on the Titanic as it sank, and is referenced in the Titanic film, a stewardess that was told to set an example to the non-English speaking passengers as the ship sank. She looked after a baby on lifeboat 16 until being rescued by the Carpathia the next day. It's not known what exactly caused the sinking of the Britannic, but the lifeboats hit the water too early. As the ship sank, the reel listed up, and a number of the lifeboats were sucked into the propellers. Violet had to jump out of the lifeboat she was in, and sustained a serious head injury, but survived. She was on board for all 3 incidents in the space of 5 years. She went back to continue to work at sea for another 30 years before retiring in 1950. She died of heart failure in 71. Her name is Violet Jessop. When the Britannic was sinking, she returned to her cabin and grabbed her toothbrush because that is what she missed most after the sinking of the Titanic. Another fun fact, E.J. Smith, captain of the Titanic, was also the captain of the Olympic when it collided with the Hawk. If you live in the USA, you have better odds of dating Taylor Swift than dying of bird flu and Ebola combined. There was a time in history when trees existed, but the fungi which causes wood to rot had not yet evolved to digest wood. Dead trees and plants would pile up, and the 35% oxygen atmosphere caused massive fires. This is also the time where petrified wood came from. Trees would sit in mud for 1000s of years and not rot, while minerals slowly replaced the wood structures. And Frank and Martin Luther King Jr. were born in the same year. Queen Elizabeth and Marilyn Monroe were born a month apart. Scientists who work with cockroaches often develop allergies towards cockroaches. At the same time, they also develop allergies to pre-ground coffee. Also heard that people that get bit by cockroaches often develop allergies for both cockroaches and shellfish. Heard of a guy in my city who bred roaches for reptile food. He was going to clean out one of the empty terrariums. He opened the hinged plastic lid too hastily, and a cloud of roach poop dust hit him in the face. Without any previous allergy, he still instantly fainted from anaphylactic shock. Goddamned most disgusting animal on earth. Stegosaurus lived 150 million years ago. T-Rex lived 65 million years ago. Stegosaurus was more ancient to the T-Rex than the T-Rex is to us. There's another one similar to that. The Egyptians were a force in 2000 BCE, the Romans were in power at around 0 CE. The Egyptians are as old that are Romans as the Romans are to us. Pineapples take 2 years to grow. Can confirm. Only 1 year to go, since I planted some pineapple heads in my yard for no particular reason. You can place all the planets of our solar system between Earth and Moon and even have a bit of spare space after. 10 out of 10 scientists will agree that this is a bad idea and should not be attempted. The US federal government classifies cocaine as a less serious, more useful drug than marijuana. We keep cocaine nose sprays in the ER for uncontrollable nosebleeds. Dozens of Americans die every day from slipping in the shower and hitting their heads. Dozens, I tell you. It's one of the primary leading causes of non-medical deaths in the USA. This makes me appreciate the lime buildup in my tub from decades of hard water. It won't go away, but my crusty tub is never slippery. There is, on average, a supernova explosion every 50 years in the Milky Way. On average, there are 30 every second in the observable universe. This one is probably the best. Let that sink in fact here. Let me just repeat that. Do you know how big the universe must be if it's 30 every second while taking 50 years in our galaxy? After hitting the iceberg, it took 2 hours and 40 minutes for the Titanic to fully submerge underwater. Let that sink in. Looking at this post makes me think about the fact that it's a lot of time. But the more I think about it, the more I realize that it took people a while to realize how significant it was. And that getting off of a huge ocean liner would take so much time. Neutron stars have such strong gravity that, if you dropped a marshmallow into one, it would be like dropping a 3 megaton nuclear warhead on Earth. Also, if you add mass to a neutron star, the volume of the star shrinks. Bill Clinton, George W. Bush and Donald Trump were all born within a 66-day stretch. Macaulay Culkin is now older than Catherine O'Hara was when she played his mom in Home Alone. Mark Hamill in The Force Awakens is the same age that Alec Guinness was in A New Hope. If you have clean water and temperature control, you are better off than half the population. The first electric car was invented at the end of the 19th century, and it went 65 miles per hour. Because early gas engines had very low torque, some of the earliest cars were gas electric. Sharks are older than trees. Edit. Okay, sharks predate trees. The oldest shark fossils we know of are 420 to 450 million years old. The oldest known tree is Weteza, about 385 million years old. Adwaita, the longest living animal ever, was a giant tortoise given to Clive of India. He was born around 1750 and died in 2006. He existed longer than the United States has. The Holy Roman Empire existed until 30 years after the United States was founded, 1776 to 1806. The Oxford University is actually older than the Aztecs. Interesting. The University of Oxford, informally Oxford University or simply Oxford, is a collegiate research university located in Oxford, England. It has no known date of foundation, but there is evidence of teaching as far back as 1096, making it the oldest university in the English-speaking world and the world's second oldest university in continuous operation. It grew rapidly from 1167 when Henry II banned English students from attending the University of Paris. After disputes between students and Oxford townsfolk in 1209, some academics fled northeast to Cambridge, where they established what became the University of Cambridge. The two ancient universities are frequently jointly referred to as Oxbridge. The Aztec Empire, or the Triple Alliance, began as an alliance of three Nahuatl city-states: Mexico, Tenochtitlan, Texcoco, and Tlacopan. These three city-states ruled the area in and around the Valley of Mexico from 1428 until the combined forces of the Spanish conquistadores and their native allies under Hernan Cortés defeated them in 1521. The moon orbits us from the west to the east, but we see it move across the sky east to west. Because of the rate of the Earth's rotation, our observation is like being in a faster car watching a slower car, heading in the same absolute direction, fall further and further behind us. France was still using the guillotine when the first Star Wars film came out. Count Taku, Sir Christopher Lee, witnessed the last public execution in France in 1939. He was 17 years old. Over the space of 3 days, an estimated 165 people survived both the Hiroshima and Nagasaki nuclear bomb attacks. Tsutomu Yamaguchi is one of the more famous ones, who was only 2 miles from ground zero when the bomb was dropped on Hiroshima. It hit when he was walking to work on the last day of a work trip. After he heard the drone of a plane, he looked up at it, and the sky lit up. He was then plucked from the ground, spun around and tossed into a nearby potato field. Miraculously he survived, despite being covered in burns, soaked in radiation, and with 2 blown eardrums. He spent a night in an air shelter, then took an overpass sleeper train home to Nagasaki to see his family. When he made it to a hospital in Nagasaki, he was so burnt a childhood friend didn't recognize him. Neither did his family. Despite his wounds, he made it to work the next day. He started giving his boss a rundown on what happened, and his boss thought he was crazy. There was no way one bomb could destroy a city. Suddenly, a bright light lit up the room. He panicked and dropped to the floor of the office seconds before the shockwave smashed out the office windows. He had just been hit twice by a nuclear blast in the space of 3 days. At the age of 93, he was given the title Nagiyo Hibakusha, or twice bombed person. He died the next year. To be in the top 1% of Americans in terms of income, you need to rake in about $400,000 a year. Round it off to $1,000 a day. The US dropped 26,172 bombs last year, 2016. That's almost 72 per day. That's about 3 bombs an hour. Every hour. For the entire year. In 2017, the US had already dropped more bombs than that by September. If you choose not to have children, you are the first person in your direct ancestry all the way back to the first humans related to you to not have children. Actually, you would be the first organism in your line not to reproduce, all the way back to the very first organism 4 billion or so years ago. Great fact. Bing Crosby advocated for salmon conservation in the North Atlantic against Denmark's overfishing in the early 1970s. The Danish government banned everything Bing Crosby in Denmark, but because he was so popular there, the Danish people protested the government, making them overturn the Bing Crosby law and even to enact salmon conservation legislation. Bing Crosby single-handedly managed to create a piece of Danish law. As you get closer to black hole, time goes slower. This means that everything farther away would experience time faster and faster as you get closer and closer to the black hole. A second for you could be a billion years for those outside of it. Thus, if you fell into a black hole and looked outside, you would see the universe die with you. Astronomer here. I always like that the coldest place we know of in the universe is on Earth. Even a dense dust cloud, aka coldest spots we know of, are a few degrees above absolute zero, the coldest temperature there is. In laboratories on Earth, however, it's quite common to get a few fractions of a degree above absolute zero for experiments. Also the highest temperature in the universe. The LHC can produce energy levels, temperatures, comparable to fractions of a second after the Big Bang. That's hot.